Hello, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm doing another podcast on heart rate training, muscle health, longevity, metabolic health, how to test and not guess how you should train. So I do personalized training and coaching programs based on science, not guessing with math. So I just wanted to share some information and research. So I'm going to share my screen and go over some of the things that we hear Peter Attia and Huberman talk about on zone 2 and zone 5 training and the importance of it. Yes, it's true. It's part of Peter talks about the importance of weightlifting and really good focus on mobility, stability, and how we want to train centenarian decathlon being kick-ass at 9 years old. And this is totally what I've been talking about on my show, especially since my dad passed a year and a half ago at age 80. And I just really am obviously passionate about helping you, and I suppose myself, improve our quality of life as we age. So we're thriving and not struggling. So I do Pinoy metabolic testing. So we're going to go over into how I figure out your zones there and then talk about women are not the same as men. And for my followers, a lot of us are high performers, overachievers that do too much of everything. So you might need less is more philosophy. And then females versus male athletes. We females need to do probably more sprint training and less time in zone 2. And I've touched before on all this, but just how sprint training is, yes, zone 5 all out, but it's not sprint interval training unless you come down to zone 1 until you are ready to go back to zone 5. So zone 5 and zone 1 are the sprint interval training we've talked a lot about. That's what Dr. Stacy Sims discusses. Zone 2 training is just the big buzzword. We've talked about that for 20 something years with Phil Maffetone's max aerobic function heart rate, MAF. And I used to do metabolic testing with New Leaf equipment back in 2005 to 2012 or whenever the company got bought out. But right now the buzzword zone 2 and zone 5 for longevity. So you can check out Peter Attia's podcast, and he's talked to Ignacio San Milan podcast to talk about the science behind that. But no, a lot of the research, you always have to see, is it done on women as well as men? And then women, we're different throughout life. We've got perimenopause and postmenopause, but then we also have premenopause. So we're kind of different phases in our life that we need to adjust our training and not do the same thing that we did when we were younger because our hormones change. So Peter talks about zone 2. He does 4 times a week. He does a lactate meter to make sure he's on right, not going too far, which lactate I've talked about is more high end of zone 3, zone 4. Zone 2 is where your peak fat max is and below your metabolic crossover point. So lactate threshold testing is not exactly testing what your zone 2 is, just to clarify that. He does his training on a bike and he works out with his lactate level, finger stick testing, which is $200-300 if you want one, but it's measuring a different method. Lactate level in your blood, 1.8 or 1.9 millimole is what he's trying to get his heart rate up where his lactate is, I think, below that, right? So getting treadmill work, he'll do incline. So this is Peter's workout. It's looking at Rhonda Patrick. This is what she does. What does Dr. Andrew Huberman do? It's really their protocol doesn't mean it's exactly what you need to do. You are a unique individual. They're all showing their workout plans based on science, but this is what works best for Peter. As an example, I don't spend 4 workouts a week in zone 2. I don't need to. I've been doing endurance training for, 25 years. And I'm getting older. I'm 52 years old. And I need more sprint training. I can tell I just need speed work. So I'm doing more of the zone 5 workouts, warm up, warm down, a 45-minute workout or 30 minutes, or some days it's shorter. So this is not one size fits all. This is not saying everyone needs to do it. He says that even this is how Peter does zone 2. not everyone has 4 hours a week. And I think when you add too much of all this stuff in, it's too much. You're just adding too much on your plate and you're adding another source of stress. So this isn't beneficial if you're making it just on top of doing your cold plunge and your sauna and you're doing your strength training and your HIIT training, you're doing zone 2 training, then you're doing yoga and Pilates. We end up just causing metabolic chaos in our body. So this is Peter's suggestions. This is what he suggests for zone 2 for a beginner. 2 hours a week is a good place to start in zone 2. Men, maybe. Women, do we need that much? Depends where you are. Endurance athletes, have we been doing zone 2? Most people don't even do zone 2 when they do metabolic testing. They think they're doing zone 2, but they're in zone 3. Now, 3 to 4 hours a week. Most people don't have that much time or want that much time. So maybe you just focus on 30 minutes and doing that 4 days a week. So that'd be 2 hours, right? So 4 hours a week might be much. So zone 5 training is high intensity. This is what Peter talks about, the fourth and final piece of exercise. You don't need to be spending much time in zone 5, but you don't want to neglect it. And discusses that zone 5 is a small part of his life, escalator being broken, that you have to sprint up the stairs, or like I used to always say that too, you have to be able to run to your flight if you're late for a plane or trying to catch your taxi driver and you're trying to race after it. So HIIT training, he explains on this website, HIIT training versus aerobic exercise. HIIT training is different. Focus on the aerobic exercise on a minute per minute or unit time basis versus HIIT training. And they're tools. They're tools in your training box to work on aging, quality of life. So zone 5 doesn't require much time, but here's what Peter talks about: 3 to 5 bouts of strength training a week, 4 bouts of zone 2, 2 bouts of zone 5 a week. Stability sprinkled in every day, maybe one day a little more, dedicated 60-minute strength session. So this is what Peter talks about on his podcast, in his book, Outlive, and on his website, peterattia.com. Now you can go listen to him more, but remember, this is the Q&A session on zone 2. He talks about what it is. I mean, us endurance athletes have been doing this hopefully for a long time. This is Maffetone's method we did 20 years ago to train for Ironman. I did it for marathons. I started doing this a long time ago. So I just want to share with you, if you want to learn more, zone 2 is the third of the 4 pillars in his framework for exercise, aerobic exercise. Zone 2 is the highest metabolic output work that you can sustain while keeping your lactate level below 2 millimole per liter. Now, zone 2 in our world, in metabolic testing, is where you're burning the most amount of fat and you're staying under your metabolic crossover point. So it depends what is the definition of zone 2. So you can go and find all these AMAs, training for this decathlon, VO2 max, stability, strength, high intensity. So you can see all that's great information talking to, I don't know how you say his name, Dr. Sam Milan. Now, lots of information from him. Same research study. Break it down. He does do metabolic testing in their clinic, but they suggest if you don't have access to it, you can do the lactate testing. It's an option. It's not determining your zone 2. And I think they understand that. So let me stop share and let's go to another screen on your zone 2 training on my slides. So if we look at my slides I'm working on, why zone 2? So where's my button here? So zone 2, let's look at the benefits of why. Hold on. Zone 2, what button do I want? Normal, outline view, slide master. All right. Oh, shoot. So I'm going to skip out of here. I'm messing it up. So zone 2, the benefits of it are going to be different depending on what you want, right? So we want to look at, why do I want zone 2? What are the benefits? Why do we keep hearing about this? So we want to look at the current slideshow. I'll get to this. So the zone 2 benefits. We want to know why this is highly recommended, right? So we want to see this is going to be in our program, maybe once a week, right? I'm doing zone 2 on my Saturday bike ride. And then I'm going to work on finding some sprint interval training in my weekday workouts. So now I finally got my slides up, but what do we want to look at? Women are not small men. Dr. Stacy Sims, in articles on her website, zone 2 training is popular, but it's mostly based on men. Women have a greater oxidative muscle fibers and higher mitochondrial density and a better metabolic flexibility as compared to men. This predisposes women to efficient fat utilization and mitochondrial function and potentially reducing the need for their time in zone 2. Women have a difference in lactate metabolism and clearance. So this impacts our response to zone 2 training. While zone 2 training may still be offering benefits for some women, individual differences need to be considered when designing training programs. So why zone 2? What's the big deal? So let's back up here a little bit. We do 5 zones. So I'm going to go through what we do in PNOE testing. Let's start here. So finding your training zones is what I suggest testing, not just doing lactate threshold testing is another method, but it's not identifying where is your peak fat burning. So we want to test and not guess what your zones are right now. And they're going to be different biking to running, and they will change. So we want to do this every 3 months. So it's just going to what fat burning efficiency means. It's a fuel source, burning fat as your main fuel source in exercise. So remember, we've talked for years about burning logs, stir flame, slow burning logs versus kindling. You want slow energy for that zone 2, long sustained distance. And that's what us endurance athletes, why we spend more time in it. Back in the day, it was 80% of our workouts training for an Ironman or long distance race was 80% and 20 in zone 2 and 20% in our speed work intervals. So fat burning, we want to start building that Maffetone's method of staying 180 minus your age, staying there until you don't see any improvements, doing a monthly test. It's 3 miles at your 180 minus your age, plus or minus 5 beats. And then you retest. And then if you're not improving, getting faster and faster at say 140 heart rate, then you would add in speed work. So you build that foundation up first and become more efficient at burning fat. So when you are more fat burning efficient or fat adapted, you're burning fat more than carbohydrates. Fat is that long, slow burning fuel source that we have more of, say 80,000 calories versus 20,000 stored carbohydrates. We want to access fat first when we're going long distance. So the higher your fat burning efficiency score on your test, the more cells will rely on fats as a fuel source. So fat burning is one of the markers on our reports that we do in PNOE testing, and it's a vital indicator of cellular health. So we measure your fat burning efficiency where your metabolic crossover point, where the intensity becomes where the carbohydrates go up and the fat goes down. So that metabolic crossover point. Now, the higher your exercise intensity is in this transition, the higher fat burning efficiency. So as I test people every 3 months, you'll start to hopefully see the benefits of them spending most time in that identified fat burning area. Now, the crossover point is where we see, well, now we're going not so much fat or percentage of fat goes down into the carbohydrate usage. So we see that in testing. Now, when we go to training zones, we're identifying your heart rate or power where you're burning different fuel sources. And so we're figuring out what is your 1 to 5 different training zones to be in and what are the benefits? What are the fuel sources? So we identify that with the metabolic testing by your RER exchange ratio, we're looking at your breath and a lot of different markers. So from that data, we can look at, do you need more focus on structural or functional training? So we get the lab results, metabolic test results back, and then we'll figure out, okay, where do you need to spend more time training? So we're identifying your areas of opportunity, your limitations, what's holding you back from being the best at what you're trying to do. So if it's running or biking or just maybe improving the aging process, so those longevity markers you're trying to improve, or you just really want to be leaner, lose some fat, gain some lean body mass will help improve your metabolism. So we want to identify what you need to work on. So then our zones, we're going to figure out science, figure out your volume of oxygen, carbon dioxide, your VT1 and VT2, your RER, it's your fat switching, fat to carbohydrate, your aerobic zones, and the breath frequencies and all that we're looking at. So zone 1 benefits are really important. Most people, we're going to measure how fast you recover, and recovery zone is really important. So we identify that in the test. And then we'll find zone 2. And zone 2, as I said, is that long sustained distance. And this is needed if you're training for endurance events or just starting out fitness, where you want to spend your workouts in to improve tendon and muscle response to the load and training adaptation. So we want to get that tissue adaptation, right? So then we look at, why is there so much talk in zone 2? Well, we talked about the improved aerobic capacity. Zone 2 training helps improve aerobic capacity, enhancing the delivery of oxygen. We can improve our endurance or stamina, obviously just endurance. And then we have the benefit of fat utilization. Training at this heart rate where we're burning the most amount of fat is beneficial if you're trying to improve your metabolic flexibility. So your fat to carbohydrate fuel source, you're able to switch back and forth, and then helping your body weight composition. Now, I must add, I'm not an advocate of just doing cardio training. If you want to improve body composition, I would spend a lot more time doing resistance training and maybe zone 2 once or twice a week, and walking more throughout the day and just moving more. Like I just talked to Stan, we just did a podcast on the vertical diet and talking about walking after each meal. So breakfast, lunch, dinner means move time. So eat and then go for a 10-minute walk, or just move even a few minutes. And then zone 2 obviously helps with cardiovascular health. So chronic diseases is cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, by helping lowering blood pressure, improving lipid profiles, insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, which is really important to look at the benefits of this zone 2. But all right, doesn't that help with strength training? Isn't our muscle health just as important, or even more? If you're going to choose between the two, you need to do both. But the zone 2 will help mitochondrial biogenesis, reduce inflammation, stress reduction, enhance brain health for the brain-derived neurofactor benefits, the longevity pathways, talking about the AMPK pathway, helps cellular energy metabolism. But remember, this is all different for everyone. And as I do the Wild Health program, we're going to go over my results soon on the podcast, but it's precision medicine using genetics and lab testing to figure out what is best training program for you. So do you have a lot of inflammation in your body? How do your genetics show that you should train? What is the best method for you? And I like to look at body composition too. If you get tested, or just give your own squeeze test. If you have a lot of muscle, not a lot of fat, or other way around, if you have extra grabbage on your thighs and belly. So figuring out what is best, how much time you spend in each zone, but each part of your workout, we go into resistance training is one part, zone training is another part, zone 2, and then the strength training. So resistance training, cardiovascular training, and HIIT training, 3 different components. So talk about Stacy Sims, look at her articles on women, or not small men, but just the benefits of the HIIT training and sprint training versus doing so much zone 2 training. Now, how do you find zone 2? As I said, we look at where you're switching fuel sources. The top end of zone 2, the bottom is this adjusted fat max, where you're burning the most. And then zone 3, we go into zone 3 is where you improve the lactate shuttle. So we talk about that lactate fuel source, how it gets used as fuel and we use it again, and how this is where you'll spend a little bit more time, probably zone 3, towards the bottom of zone 3 for a race. And the benefits are more that tempo, maybe you're doing a 10 or 20-minute piece in your training run, for example, that would be your bottom of zone 3. So there's benefits here, how we figure that out. I go over this with my clients. Anaerobic glycolysis is where we're working different fuel source in zone 3. So we don't see the high percentage of fat, it's more the glycolysis, anaerobic glycolysis. And then zone 3, how we find that out, we're looking at your ventilation, your breathing frequency, looking at your pH balance in response to accumulation of metabolic byproducts such as lactate levels, and your carbon dioxide level starts to increase. And zone 3 utilizes carbohydrates as the main fuel source as exercise intensity goes up, and we're getting that lactate threshold area in zone 3. Okay, and then what is ventilatory threshold? We can go into that another time, but that's kind of what's more your anaerobic threshold. This is a marker where we would say the accumulation of metabolic byproducts increases, as I just said, lactate, carbon dioxide, moderate high intensity of exercise, the point where you start to rely on more anaerobic. So that's kind of what VT2 is. So zone 3. And then zone 4, we get to, this is where you're doing more the 1 to 4 minute pieces. We call them medium intervals. And this is where fuel source and breathing frequency changes again. The fuel system's more phosphorylation. This helps you buffer byproducts using energy system. So this is the zone 4. And then we go up to next zone 5, but you have to come back. These are intervals, 1 to 4 minutes. Zone 4, how much time you need in zone 1 to come back up to zone 4. Okay, so there's that rest to work ratio you need to remember. Now, this is where you're going to get some benefits to your mitochondria health. And then this is where you hear about the VO2 max workouts. Another area I'm trying to research men versus women, because you hear about this Norwegian study, the 4x4 workout that you do 4 minutes in zone 4, keeping your heart rate up here, the highest you can sustain for heart rate you can sustain for 4 minutes, come back down for 4 minutes, do that for 4 times. I think that's what it is. But is that for men and women or just men? Because Stacy Sims, I message said it might be better for women to do more of the zone 5 sprint training to improve VO2 max. So good topic to dive into. Who is that research done on? 20-something-year-old guys, or is there females in that study? At what age are they and what hormone cycle are they in? So finding zone 4, that's going to be more your VT2 minus 10 beats and how we figure that out. I won't go into, but we're also looking at breath frequencies, 30, 40 breaths. And your fuel source is lactate phosphorylation. And so you're not able to stay up there as long if you're just starting, because you have to metabolize different fuel source and work on recovery time to help flush out the metabolic waste, basically, think of it as. Now, then we get to what we want to look at zone 5. So the fuel source in zone 4, zone 5, phosphorylation occurs in that we're more anaerobic glycolysis as we go higher, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. And so our fuel sources change. And so that's what we can see in the metabolism test, what we're looking at. How are we creating energy for that workout, that intensity? Where are we creating ATP, that source of energy, and creating that energy in the mitochondria, and looking at the whole Krebs cycle? You can dive into the breakdown of carbs, fats, and you don't really use proteins, but I was trying to get some research on how are ketones used in any of this. So zone 5, or the sprint interval training, this is where we're going to improve our mitochondrial density. And if you don't do a lot of zone 2, I was taught from Daniel Crumbach that zone 2 is beneficial for mitochondria health, mitochondria density, but also spending time in zone 5, you're going to get those benefits. So women, if we find we need more sprint, we need more speed, more fast twitch muscle fiber, this will still give you benefits for mitochondria health. So Little info on what that means. It's mitochondria, or the organelles responsible for producing energy in the form of ATP through cellular respiration. Cells that require a lot of energy, such as muscle cells or neurons, tend to have a higher mitochondria density to meet their physical demands. Mitochondria density can vary depending on factors, a cell type, physiological state, and environmental conditions. So finding zone 5 is really, you don't need to use your heart rate monitor when you're doing a test or a workout, sprint interval workout, because you're just going hard as you can, that you can't go any harder. That 10 seconds, you're trying to hit 20 seconds, that seems so challenging and you're just dying. So working super hard and then bring your heart rate back down. So we're going to see that metabolic waste, the fuel source is using is ATP PC, so creatine a phosphate. Note the word creatine. So if you have followed any of the research on creatine for performance, muscle health, and brain health, and women, I've read, need it more than men. So we want to get that 3 to 5 gram scoop I just put in my water of creatine phosphate, but note that's a fuel source you're using in zone 5 and when you're lifting heavy weights. So using more creatine, having that in as a main supplement, as I do with magnesium and getting my minerals through my electrolytes and LMNT in my water, and doing essential fatty acids. Those are some key supplements you want to take for most people, just what we don't get enough through our food. So creatine is hard to get enough of through your food. And most people don't digest their food properly and absorb everything. So strength training, this is where we're going to find if we need hill sprints, identify if you need improvement in this area. This is what we can figure out when we personalize a workout program. So that's the personalization part, is where we look at, okay, what fueling do we need? What intensity? So S fuels is a great example. And then sprint training, we'll finish up here, but this is where I look at with people based on their test results. Where do you have more limitations? So if we kind of fizzled early at your top end of zone 4, zone 5, and then your recovery wasn't great, when we stop the test, we do a 2 minutes, 30-second recovery marker. How did you do? And if you didn't perform as well as you could, then we know, okay, we need to focus on interval training properly, that we go up to zone 5, 10 to 30 seconds, work rest ratios 1 to 2. So that means 1 10 to 30 second sprints means twice that long, a minute, say, in my zone 1, not zone 3, but zone 1. Getting to zone 1 and staying there for 30, 60 seconds, 26. So by the time you get down there and then stay there another 30. So medium sprints are that zone 4. Long sprints are top of zone 3, bottom of zone 4. Those are the 5 to 10 minute pieces. And then your tempo. So if you're doing a 10K race, for example, would be probably zone 3, 10 to 20 minutes. Maybe you're walk the aid station, get some water, do another 10-minute piece and do it again. So you're getting kind of break. But tempo intervals in your training program are a great way to improve it. And that's going to be at zone 3. Now, zone 2 is, say, 40 minutes. And that's where you're staying that long, sustained distance, where you're training your body to metabolize free fatty acids, fats. And working on that, how many days a week? Peter, we said 4 times a week. Stacy Sims, I would think, would say, hey, 1 time a week. I know when I was coaching for Ben Greenfield, we just told people go an hour and a half hike on Sundays, once a week, do a zone 2 workout. So I don't like to generalize what everyone needs to do the same thing recommendations. Let's look at what you need to do, what you're not doing enough of, and let's figure out a plan based on your test results. And then look at your goals, look at your genetics, look at your metabolic health markers. So that's just what I want to go in. If you have any questions, head to the website, debbiepotts.net. We want to avoid what we say as FDN practitioners, this metabolic chaos. So finding balance in everything. That's why I say less is more sometimes. If you're doing too much of all these good things, they get to be no longer acute hormetic stressors. They get to be chronic stressors. And then we create this metabolic chaos, imbalance in your cortisol, your DHEA, and then we get this whatever, all these things happen. And so we want to look at that whole picture. So take care of yourself and start looking at what you need to do for your future self. So work on nutrition, nutritional therapy, eating nutrient-dense food, looking at exercise type and duration, what's best for you as an individual based on what you have been doing and what you want to be doing, and your metabolism test, stress management. Are you doing too much of everything that gets to be chronic stress? Too much chronic stress is huge. And then number one thing we talked about with Stan is, whoops, I just messed up, is sleep. Do you have a quality sleep routine? Do you have a sleep routine, hygiene routine in the evening, how you start the day? We go over that when I coach my clients. And then movement, mobility. Are you sitting all day, but you're working out in the morning? We want move every hour, get up and move. Luckily, my office here, my glass house, I have to go back down to the house to go to the bathroom or get water or drink or something, and then come back up. So I get my movement. Now, digestion and gut health, we'll talk to a couple doctors coming up, but Super Gut Health book I love. We're going to talk about gut health there and digestion, hydration, mineral balance, talk about LMNT all the time, and happiness, gratitude, play, really important part. So this is what I call the holistic method. And I think it's important not just focus on your training. I would maybe, as Stan said, talking about sleep first, and then what you're eating, how, what, when, not fasting so much as we used to think we should, and eat more, get more protein, stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So if you have questions, head to my website, wpotts.net, and let's work on living our best life as our future self. Thank you.